welcome to Now This Interview, the second edition. Today's special in-studio guest is Basya Schechter of Pharaoh's daughter, and we're very happy to have her here in the studio for lots of questions. Welcome in, Basya.
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm good. And you?
I'm doing pretty good. So, your music, I would describe it as psychedelic, atmospheric, mystical, spiritual, and some other words thrown in. How would you describe your music?
I feel like every time I describe my music, it's different. It's a mix. It's just like everything that I've been exposed to comes out
Right.
in different ways, and I like the way you described it.
You are inspired by The Doors, so you incorporated that and classic rock sounds into this album, Haran.
Yes, I like I like soundscapes. I like when a song has a mood. When you put on a song and you can go into the mood of the song from beginning to end, it grabs you in an emotional place and it keeps you there and it takes you different places, but within a certain mood. I feel like the Doors were amazing. The Doors and Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin, they were geniuses at creating these kind of textures and these kind of soundscapes.
Right.
As my first influences in the Western musical world, I hadn't listened to English music or Western music at all until I was like 16, 17 years old, and those were my first influences, so they stayed pretty strong inside me too.
And the second track is vocalized in Aramaic language.
Yeah, it's Aramaic. A lot of the prayers, the singing prayers in the Jewish tradition, are taken from the time period where the Jews lived in Babylon and spoke Aramaic, and wrote and composed in Aramaic, and they carried these poetry, these poems and these songs throughout the generations, and this is called Kari Bone, which was one of those pieces.
And now, can you kind of explain to the people that they're not familiar with it, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but is it the Zimrat tradition?
A tradition of singing a lot of mystical, Kabbalistic poetry that was, I think, spanning mostly from the 12th, 13th century till the 17th, 18th century. Poetry written during that time period, explaining the mystical qualities of the Sabbath. And these were poems that were, there were certain poems that were organized for Friday night and certain poems that were designated for Saturday afternoon. Many people composed melodies to these texts, to these prayers, and it's a tradition of creating new melodies for these prayers that are constantly made fresh and made alive and vibrant and connected by a new generation of composers.
Right, and I find it very interesting and great that you have combined all of these elements of poetry, of psychedelic sounds of the 70s, classic rock, and Judaism, and you have created this sound, which is really amazing. And Yehuda Halevi, you quoted some of his material and incorporated that into the tracks in Haran. Can you go about explaining some of those elements?
I mean, he was a mystic and wrote beautiful, beautiful poetry. He's one of those people that created these kind of texts.
And I understand it has a lot to do with the Sabbath.
I mean, let me hear. What do you mean by that?
Well, I have a quote here that says that the words make the comparison to Sabbath from Yehuda Halevi.
Well, the song is about the Sabbath.
Okay.
The song is about, talking about a lot of different elements. In the time of Noah, there was a dove that got sent out after the flood had finished.
Uh-huh.
And the dove is sent out to find out whether the land has become dry or not. Because if the dove didn't come back, then he was able to find places to rest. But if he did come back, which he did come back, the first time he was sent out, and he put a leaf in his mouth, then that meant there was, he could pick a leaf, but he couldn't rest anywhere.
Right.
And
okay.
when the dove was able to go and not come back, that means he found rest. So in this poem, he makes connections to the rest that the Yonah was able. Yonah is the dove that the Yonah was able to find after the flood had subsided, to the kind of rest that we're searching for in the day of the Sabbath. I think the Sabbath is probably one of the most genius parts of the Jewish tradition.
Right, and I noticed that two of the tracks on this album are about Sabbath.
There are way more about Sabbath. Karibon, Yonah, Hashomer Shabbat, Askinu, I think 4 or 5, almost half of the record.
Oh, wow, okay. That I did not realize.
Yeah. No, it was a very strange process because the songs that I originally started with on this recording, when I first started the recording, I had a whole different repertoire that was going to be recorded. The songs just didn't work at all. And my producer kept saying, this one's not going to work, this one's not going to work, this one's not going to work. So he said, you need to keep writing. So I kept writing, and somehow every time I wrote a melody, the text from the Zmiro tradition seemed to fit like nothing else did. Every time I created a melody, the text from the Zmiro tradition would connect.
Well, it's a very beautiful album, and each track is produced very well, and everything complements each other. It's a great album.
Thank you.
What things inspired you when you were in yeshiva?
I think there were some things that happened in yeshiva that I didn't think were inspirations at the time. They were chores and they were tedious. Like we were forced to memorize pages and pages and pages of poetry and song in the Bible. Like if a prophet, it was like Shiras Devorah, which is a song of Deborah, and she was a prophet and she wrote this song, and we would have to memorize the whole thing. Or if like Jacob, he gave blessings to his sons, and each it's like pages and pages of blessings, and we had to memorize all these blessings to each one of the sons, the 12. We became the 12 tribes. And it was tedious and, exhausting, but those are the texts that stayed in my subconscious and my conscious. And when you write music, and for some reason, some of the music I write tells me that I need to be expressing something in English, something, that fits to the melody and it's English. But a lot of the melodies I've been writing in the last few years don't feel like they would make sense in English. And the texts that attach themselves onto the melodies that I write are the texts that I had memorized when I was much younger. Mm-hmm. Like mantras.
Where can people see you and your shows and Pharaoh's Daughter?
Okay, the two best places to reach Pharaoh's Daughter is on my MySpace, .com/Pharaoh's Daughter, or pharaohsdaughter.com. And we're trying to work out a tour now in Israel, hopefully in November, though, we're not sure if that's going to happen yet. We have a tour in Florida in January, which is the best time to tour Florida.
Okay. I'm sure there's lots of Florida fans out there.
We're going to Chicago in September and Indiana. Chicago in August, end of August, and Indiana in end of September. We go a lot of places nationally. We just got an invitation to someplace in Hungary.
Oh, wow. Okay. Thank you, Basya, for being on Now This Interview. And until next time, this is Now This Interview.